Hello, my dear friends. Picture for a moment the feeling of cool, dense clay in the palm of your hand. It's slightly damp, yielding to the pressure of your thumb, holding the impression you leave behind. This simple, earthy substance is the anchor for our entire journey tonight. We're traveling back more than 3,000 years to the sun-baked plains of Anatolia, the land we now call Turkey, to uncover the hidden lives of the women who lived there. And I'll be honest with you, as glamorous as a trip back in time sounds, the reality is that the profound, inescapable dirtiness of the ancient world would probably send you screaming back to the present within an hour. The past is a foreign country, and its sanitation standards are not to our liking. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Your support, like the clay we'll be discussing, helps build this channel. Now, find that perfect spot. Let your head sink into your pillow. Imagine the vast, starry sky over a landscape of rolling hills and rugged mountains, a world lit only by firelight and the moon. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. Your eyes are adjusting to the flickering oil lamps. You are standing in a grand chamber, but it's a strange kind of grand. The air is thick with the scent of cedar wood, beeswax, and something else, something dusty and fundamentally earthy, like a freshly tilled field after a light rain. Before you, a woman sits on a low, carved wooden stool. This is no ordinary woman. This is Pujiipa, great queen of the Hittite Empire, one of the most powerful women in the entire ancient world. She is not just a wife or a mother, she is a diplomat, a high priestess, a co-ruler with her husband, King Hattusili III. You watch as a scribe, a young man with ink-stained fingers, presents her with a flattened tablet of wet, grey clay. It's a letter addressed to the great Rameses II, Pharaoh of Egypt. Pujiipa reads the cuneiform script, her lips moving silently. She nods, satisfied. From a small, embroidered pouch, she produces her seal. It's not made of clay, but of silver, a cylinder intricately carved with her name, her titles, and the divine symbols that grant her authority. She is the servant of the sun goddess of Arina, and the entire land is under her divine protection. With practiced, steady pressure, she rolls the seal across the bottom of the damp tablet. The clay receives the impression perfectly, a mark of power that will be baked hard in a kiln, carried by messenger across deserts and mountains, and read by the most powerful man on earth. In this moment, you are witnessing the pinnacle of female power in the Bronze Age. Her word, pressed into this humble clay, can forge an alliance, end a war, or arrange the marriage of a princess. It is an act of immense, almost abstract, political authority. This is the glamorous illusion, a queen whose influence spans empires, whose will is made manifest in these permanent, sacred texts. But now, I want you to pull your focus back. Look away from the queen and her powerful seal. Let your gaze drift up from the richly coloured floor rugs to the walls of this royal audience chamber. What do you see? There is no polished marble, no massive, hewn stones like the pyramids of the pharaoh she writes to. The walls are mud. They are constructed from simple, sun-dried mud bricks, stacked one on top of the other, held together with more mud as mortar. The surface is covered in a layer of plaster and painted with vibrant frescoes of hunts and processions, but beneath that thin veneer of civilization, this entire magnificent palace, the heart of a mighty empire, is made of earth. And with that realization, the other senses kick in. The earthy smell you noticed before is stronger now. It's the smell of the very building you're in, which is, slowly, imperceptibly, shedding microscopic dust into the air with every gust of wind from the open-air courtyard. If you were to run your hand along the wall, it would feel cool, but slightly uneven. You might even find a small crack near the floor, a tiny fissure in the plaster. And you realize, with a jolt, that this palace is not a permanent fortress. It is a constant, ongoing project. A heavy season of rain could weaken a wall, causing it to slump. A dry spell could make the bricks brittle. The whole structure is in a state of managed decay. This wasn't because the Hittites were poor or unsophisticated. Far from it. This was the most practical, intelligent way to build in the Anatolian highlands. Wood was scarce, reserved for roof beams and decorative elements. Stone was incredibly labor-intensive to quarry and shape, used mainly for the foundations and the mighty defensive walls that ringed the city of Hattusa. For the sprawling palace complex, the temples, and every single home, mud brick was the perfect material. It was abundant, cheap, and provided fantastic insulation, keeping rooms cool in the blistering summer and warm during the freezing winter. But this practicality came with a shocking, and rather unpleasant, reality. The thick, earthen walls were an ideal home for more than just the royal family. Your modern mind, conditioned by sterile environments, immediately understands the unseen threat. Scorpions could burrow into the cracks. Centipedes and spiders would find 1,000 dark, cool places to hide. You might even hear the faint scratching of rodents nesting deep within the structure. Imagine the great Queen Pujipa, having just sealed a treaty that will affect thousands of lives, retiring to her chambers and having a servant check the bed linens not just for wrinkles, but for anything with more than 4 legs that might have crawled out of the wall during the day. The sheer political power is housed within a shell of biological vulnerability. The glamorous illusion of untouchable royalty is contrasted with the shocking reality that the Queen's bedroom wall could be a tenement for insects. It's the ultimate secret of the palace. For all its painted grandeur, it is a living, breathing, and slightly creepy mound of dirt. And from this clay that forms the walls of power, our story will now move to the clay that is shaped to form the very gods themselves. You leave the Queen's audience chamber, stepping out from the cool, earthy dark into the brilliant, almost blinding Anatolian sunlight. The dust from the mud brick palace seems to dance in the air, catching the light like tiny golden flecks. Your path leads you across a wide, paved courtyard towards the temple district, the sacred heart of the city of Hattusa. Here the buildings are still made of that same humble mud brick, but the foundations are massive, cyclopean stones, grounding the structures in an aura of ancient permanence. The air changes. The scent of cedar and beeswax is replaced by the sharper, sweeter smell of burning juniper incense and roasting barley, offerings to the 1,000 gods of the Hittite pantheon. In a quiet, sun-drenched corner of a temple precinct, a woman sits on a reed mat. She is a priestess, her hair neatly braided and bound, her linen dress immaculate. Her focus is absolute. Before her is a lump of the finest, most carefully prepared clay. It's been sieved to remove any grit, washed in sanctified water, and kneaded with prayers whispered into its very substance. This is not the common clay of bricks and pots. This is divine earth, destined for a higher purpose. You watch as her long, slender fingers, both practiced and reverent, begin to shape the lump. She is not merely crafting, she is performing a sacred ritual. With each pinch and pull, she is coaxing a divine form from the raw material of the world. Slowly, an idol takes shape. It is a goddess, her hips wide, her belly rounded, her breasts full, a powerful symbol of fertility and life. The face is serene and stylized, not a portrait of a person, but the embodiment of a divine concept. The priestess works in a state of meditative grace. This act, for her, is a conversation with the gods. By giving the goddess a physical form, she is inviting that deity's benevolent presence into the temple, ensuring good harvests, healthy children, and protection for the city. The finished figurine is a perfect, idealized body, smooth and sacred, untouched by flaw or decay. This is the glamorous illusion, a woman so in tune with the divine that she can create a perfect, immortal body from a handful of clay, a conduit for cosmic order and blessings. It is a moment of profound peace and control. But then, you notice her jaw tighten for a moment. Her eye twitches. A flicker of pain crosses her serene face before she masters it. Beneath the surface of this holy ritual, a very mortal drama is unfolding. She has a toothache, a deep, throbbing, relentless ache in a molar that has been plaguing her for weeks. The pain is a constant, grinding distraction, a stark reminder of the fragile, imperfect vessel that is her own body. The perfect, divine form on the mat before her is a universe away from the messy reality of her own physical suffering. Later, the ritual complete, she seeks out the temple's healer, an old man known as an ashipu, a physician priest who specializes in the afflictions caused by angry gods and malicious demons. He does not lead her to a bright, clean room for an examination. Instead, they enter a small, dark chamber at the back of a storeroom, the air thick with the smell of dried herbs, animal fat, and something acrid you can't quite place. He doesn't ask about the pains, location, or intensity. He asks what oaths she may have broken, what rituals she may have neglected, who she may have angered. In his worldview, Her toothache is not a simple matter of decay. It is the work of a demon, the tooth worm, sent as punishment by a god she has offended. A perfect, divine clay goddess cannot help her now. The cure is not serene or beautiful. The physician-priest chants a long incantation to exorcise the demon. Then, he prepares a poultice. He takes a small stone bowl and mixes crushed dates and beer into a paste, but then adds a foul-smelling yellow powder sulphur and a clump of something dark and fibrous that you realize with a lurch is dried mouse droppings. This concoction is to be packed against her gum, the noxious taste and smell intended to drive the worm out of its hiding place. As she endures this, you see his other tools laid out on a dirty cloth, a bronze probe, a pair of crude forceps, and a sharp flake of obsidian. There is no concept of sterilization. The cure is as likely to cause a deadly infection as it is to solve the problem. The shocking reality is the brutal, terrifying, and unhygienic clash between her sacred duties and her profane suffering. The hands that shaped a flawless goddess are now clenched in agony, her mouth filled with a repulsive paste, all in a desperate attempt to appease a force she cannot see. And yet, in their world, this made perfect sense. There was no line between the spiritual and the physical. An illness was a spiritual crisis manifesting in the body. The serene creation of the idol was an act of preventative medicine on a cosmic scale, an attempt to maintain favor with the gods and keep the demons at bay. The disgusting, painful treatment was a direct, aggressive intervention to fix a spiritual problem that had already occurred. Both the beautiful ritual and the brutal cure were two sides of the same coin, two different ways of negotiating with the powerful, invisible forces that governed every aspect of life, from the health of the kingdom to the throbbing of a single tooth. Her body was a battlefield for gods and demons, and the clay she shaped was both a prayer for peace and an offering to the victors. This total dependence on divine whim was a constant, terrifying vulnerability. But what if a woman could secure her life not with prayers to the gods, but with a contract baked into that very same clay? You find yourself transported forward in time, though not by much, and southwest in place. The grand, imperial capital of Hattusa recedes, and you are now in Kanish, a bustling, cosmopolitan merchant colony in the heart of Anatolia. This isn't a Hittite city. It's an outpost of the powerful Assyrian Empire to the east. The air here buzzes with a different kind of energy. It's not the solemn hum of ritual or the weighty silence of royal power, but the chaotic, multilingual catter of commerce. The smell of dust and dung is overlaid with the sense of exotic spices, fine textiles, and the metallic tang of tin and copper. Clay is still everywhere, but here its primary purpose isn't to build palaces or praise gods, but to make money. You are drawn to a spacious, well-appointed house in the lower town, built, of course, from familiar mud brick walls on stone foundations. Inside, away from the clamour of the marketplace, a woman is seated on a colourful rug, her back against a cushion. Her name is Tarmkbai. She is not a queen or a priestess. She is a businesswoman, the wife of an Assyrian merchant who is currently on a trading mission hundreds of miles away. Spread before her are dozens of small, pillow-shaped clay tablets. Each one is covered in the dense, wedge-shaped script of cuneiform. This is her office, her ledger, her entire world of international trade laid out on the floor. With intense concentration, she dictates a letter to a scribe. She is sharp, direct, and all business. To my agent, Puzarasha, she begins, "You have sent me tin of a poor quality. The last shipment was short by 3 minas. Sell it for whatever price you can get, but do not let them cheat you. Use the silver to purchase fine wool, the kind the locals here prefer, but only if the price is right. And remind my husband his brother still owes us 5 shekels of silver from 2 years ago." She is managing inventory, negotiating prices, giving orders to agents abroad and keeping meticulous financial records. Some of the tablets are contracts, sealed with the cylindrical seals of her business partners. Others are letters from her husband, filled with instructions and market reports. This is her domain. While the men travelled, the women of Kanish were the anchors of the operation, the vital hubs of communication and administration that kept the entire trading network from collapsing. You are witnessing a startling degree of female autonomy and economic power, all meticulously documented on these unassuming lumps of clay. This is the glamorous illusion, the savvy, empowered businesswoman, master of her financial destiny, running a complex enterprise with an authority that feels almost modern. But now, let's follow one of those contracts. Let's trace the journey of the very goods, she commands with such confidence. A caravan is being assembled in the dusty yard outside the city gates. This is the reality behind the clean, abstract numbers on her clay tablets. Dozens of donkeys are being loaded with heavy packs. The air is filled with their braying, the shouting of the donkey drivers, and the thick, pungent smell of animal sweat and excrement. The tin that Tarmkbai complained about is here. Dull grey ingots strapped to a groaning animal. The fine textiles she uses to make a profit are wrapped in leather, but that offers only limited protection. This caravan will spend the next 6 weeks crossing the Taurus Mountains. The journey is brutal. The illusion of control from her comfortable room in Kanish shatters when you see the path ahead. There are no paved roads, only treacherous mountain passes, rocky tracks that can lame a donkey in a single misstep. A sudden downpour can turn a dry river into a raging torrent, sweeping away animals and their precious cargo. The drivers are armed with daggers, but the threat of bandits is constant. Every shadowy rock formation could hide an ambush. A lost donkey isn't just a financial setback. It's a loss of capital that could take years to recoup. And then there are the invisible threats, the ones no weapon can fight. The water sources along the way are shared by countless animals and people. A single sick traveller can contaminate a well that will be used by the next caravan, and the next. Dysentery is a constant companion on the road, a debilitating illness that can kill a strong man in days. The food is monotonous, and often spoil-dried fish, hard bread, and whatever can be foraged. Insects are a plague. Biting flies torment the men and animals by day, and lice and fleas infest their bedrolls by night. This is the shocking reality. The sophisticated, orderly world of her clay tablet contracts is built upon a foundation of filth, danger, and disease. For every shekel of silver recorded in her neat cuneiform script, a man on the road paid a price in sweat, fear, and the very real risk of a miserable death. The logic of their world demanded this stark division. The risks were simply too great to be managed any other way. The entire Assyrian trading system depended on this structure, the mobile, risk-taking men on the caravans and the stable, administrative women at the home base. Her authority was not a luxury, it was a structural necessity. The clay tablets, so solid and permanent, bridged the gap between the chaotic, perilous journey and the orderly world of commerce. They transformed a desperate gamble on a mountain pass into a predictable entry in a ledger. The filth and danger of the caravan were the necessary, brutal cost of the silver that filled the coffers in Kanish, a cost that Tarmkbai understood implicitly, even if she never had to smell the stench of a sick donkey herself. The clay in her hands represented a world of order and control, a world built by transforming the raw, messy reality of the road into something that could be managed. But even in the home, the clay that brought order and sustenance had a dark side of its own. We move now from the world of international trade to the heart of the domestic sphere. You are inside a simple, one-room home, much like the thousands that make up the residential quarters of any Anatolian town. The space is small, intimate, and filled with the rhythms of daily life. The walls, as always, are that familiar, comforting mud brick, cool to the touch. Light streams in from the doorway and a small, high window illuminating the swirling dust motes. In the center of the room, a woman is on her knees, her body moving in a steady, practiced rhythm. She is not a queen, a priestess, or a merchant. She is a mother, a wife, an ordinary woman, and today she is a potter. In front of her is a large ball of coarse, reddish clay dug from a pit just outside the town. This isn't the sacred, purified clay of the temple, nor the smooth, clean clay of the scribe's tablet. It is gritty, filled with tiny pebbles and bits of straw that will give the finished vessel its strength. Her hands are not slender and delicate, they are strong, the palms calloused, the knuckles chapped, her fingernails packed with drying mud. She works with an unthinking competence born of a lifetime of practice. You watch as she begins to coil long ropes of clay, one on top of the other, pinching and smoothing them together. Slowly, a large storage jar begins to rise under her hands. It is not perfectly symmetrical, and her fingerprints are visible all over its surface, but it is sturdy, functional, and essential. She is making the infrastructure of her family's survival. This jar will hold the winter's supply of grain, protecting it from moisture. The smaller jug next to it will carry water from the communal well. The shallow bowls drying in the sun will be used for their daily meals of barley porridge. There is a deep, primal satisfaction in this work. It is a direct transformation of the earth beneath her feet into the tools of her own existence. The scent of the wet clay fills the small room, a smell of life, potential, and self-sufficiency. This is the glamorous illusion, the wholesome, grounding image of a woman providing for her family, her hands connected to the very earth, creating vessels of life and sustenance with skill and purpose. But as you look closer, your modern eyes see a hidden danger that she is completely unaware of. Once these pots are fired in the simple, open-air kiln, they will be porous. The low firing temperature doesn't create the vitrified, glass-like surface of modern ceramics. It leaves the clay permeable, filled with microscopic holes and fissures. That large, beautiful storage jar for the grain. It is also a perfect, dark, and slightly damp environment for mold and mycotoxins to flourish. The family might never taste it in the bread they make, but the slow, cumulative effect of these toxins could lead to chronic illness, weakened immune systems, and a host of ailments they would attribute to angry gods or bad air. Now, look at the water jug. It's a handsome, useful object. But every time it's filled at the well, a tiny amount of bacteria from the water takes up residence in the porous clay walls. The inside of the jug is never fully dry, creating an ideal breeding ground. They can't scrub it clean. Any harsh abrasive would scrape away the clay itself. So, with every drink of water, they are also ingesting a low-level dose of whatever bacteria is thriving inside their jug. And the food bowls? After a meal of meat stew, tiny particles of fat and protein would be absorbed into the porous surface. Without hot water and soap, it's impossible to truly clean them. They are simply wiped out, leaving a residue of nutrients for bacteria to feast upon. This is the shocking, invisible reality. The very clay vessels that sustained her family were also, in a way, slowly poisoning them. They were incubators for bacteria, a constant source of low-grade contamination that contributed to the endemic nature of digestive ailments, fevers, and what they simply called wasting sickness. The back-breaking work of creating these pots, a source of pride and a symbol of her domestic competence, was inadvertently creating a hidden battlefield of microbes right on her dinner table. The logic of this is painfully simple. It was the best they had. This technology-coiled, low-fired earthenware was a massive leap forward from using animal skins or woven baskets for storage. It was a technology that had served humanity for thousands of years. The connection between the porous clay and the constant stomach cramps or the fever that took her youngest child was a connection they were simply not equipped to make. Sickness was caused by demons, divine displeasure, or miasma, bad air we smelled in the physician-priest's chamber. They saw the pot as a solid, inert object, a safe container. They couldn't see the teeming microscopic world it harbored. The calloused hands that shaped the life-sustaining jar were also shaping a secret, unintended vessel of sickness. The connection to the earth was more intimate and more dangerous than she could ever know. This intimacy with raw materials extended beyond the clay to the very clothes on her back, woven with threads colored by a vibrant and dangerous chemistry. You find yourself in the same small, mud-brick house, but the focus of the work has shifted. The clay pots are now stacked against a wall, and the woman's hands are busy with another essential, rhythmic task. You are in the presence of the single most significant economic activity for women in the ancient world, textile production. The air in the room is different now. The earthy smell of clay is gone, replaced by the faint, oily scent of lanolin from raw wool and the dry, grassy smell of flax fibers. A large, upright loom, a simple but effective machine of wood and stone, waits, dominates one side of the room. It is on this device that a woman would spend countless hours of her life. You watch as she works. Her fingers fly across the vertical warp threads, deftly inserting the weft thread with a wooden shuttle, then packing it down tightly with a heavy, comb-like tool. It is mesmerizing, hypnotic work. The rhythmic thump-thump-thump of the comb is the heartbeat of the household economy. She is weaving a bolt of wool and cloth. The pattern is complex, a series of repeating geometric shapes in deep blues and a startlingly vibrant red. This cloth is more than just a covering. It is a manifestation of her skill, her family's wealth, and her contribution to their status. A finely woven, brightly colored garment was a luxury item, a primary unit of currency and trade. Remember the letters of the Assyrian merchant woman, Tamkbai. This is the kind of wool she was desperate to acquire. The cloth this woman is creating could be used to pay taxes, traded for bronze tools, or form part of her daughter's degree. It is a physical embodiment of her value. This is the glamorous illusion, the artisan, the creator of beauty and wealth, her patient labor transforming raw fibers into a work of art that is both practical and prestigious. But where did those beautiful colors come from? Your modern mind, accustomed to synthetic dyes, might not even think to ask. You follow the woman as she prepares a new batch of red wool. She goes not to a clean workshop, but to a pit dug in the yard behind the house. The stench hits you immediately. It's a sharp, ammoniac, and deeply unpleasant odor that stings your eyes. This is her dye pot, a large ceramic vessel simmering over a low fire. To get that brilliant, color-fast red, she is using a dye derived from the roots of the madder plant. But to make the dye bind to the wool fibers, it needs a mordant, a chemical fixing agent. The most common and effective mordant available to her was alum, a mineral salt that had to be mined and traded. But for many, a cheaper, more readily available alternative was used. She picks up a clay jug from beside the pit and pours a yellowish liquid into the simmering vat. It is stale urine. The ammonia in the aged urine was a powerful and effective mordant. For centuries, every household collected its urine for this very purpose. The shocking reality is that the creation of these beautiful, valuable textiles was a smelly, caustic, and often dangerous process. The woman's hands, which you saw just moments ago weaving with such grace, are now plunged into this hot, foul-smelling chemical bath. The skin on her hands is permanently stained, cracked, and often burned by the chemicals she works with day after day. And the madder red was one of the safer options. To achieve a brilliant blue, she would use indigo or woad, which also required a fermentation process in a vat of stale urine, creating an equally vile stench. For a rich purple, the famous Tyrian purple, a dye, so expensive it was reserved for royalty, was derived from the glands of thousands of rotting murex sea snails, a process so foul-smelling that dyers' workshops were, by law, relegated to the outskirts of towns. To get a vibrant yellow, she might use saffron, which was safe but astronomically expensive, or she might use the dried flowers of the safflower plant, which, when mixed with certain mineral salts, could cause severe skin irritation. The most dangerous was the brilliant white. To bleach linen or wool to a pure, desirable white, the cloth was repeatedly soaked in a lye solution made from wood ash and water and laid out in the sun. Lye is a powerful alkali, a caustic substance that can cause severe chemical burns. The worldview that made this acceptable was one of harsh necessity. Color was wealth. A vibrant, lasting color was a sign of expertise and prosperity. The foul smells and the physical damage to their bodies were simply the cost of doing business, the price of creating value. They had no concept of long-term toxic exposure. A skin rash or a lung ailment from breathing in chemical fumes for years was just another of life's many hardships, likely blamed on a curse or bad blood. The brilliant red cloak a man wore in a procession was a symbol of his status, but the secret reality was that it was born from a woman's hands plunged into a stinking vat of urine and chemicals. The beauty of the final product completely masked the filthy, dangerous process of its creation. The threads of destiny she wove were colored with her own discomfort and risk, a daily sacrifice made to elevate her family's standing in the world, one smelly, toxic pot of dye at a time. And this same drive to build a better life from the ground up was present in the very construction of the house she worked in. Let's pull our focus away from the intricate work of the loom and the caustic dye pots, and look at the larger structure that contains it all, the home. You stand outside this house, the same humble dwelling we've been visiting, but you see it now with new eyes. You see it not as a pre-existing structure, but as a project, a creation. And in ancient Anatolia, building a house was very often women's work. The men might quarry the heavy stones for the foundation and hoist the massive cedar beams for the roof, but the walls, the substance of the home itself, were raised by the hands of the women. Imagine a group of them, sisters, cousins, neighbors working together under the hot sun. The atmosphere is one of community and cooperation. Laughter and gossip mix with the rhythmic squelch and slap of wet mud. They stand ankle-deep in a shallow pit, mixing the local clay soil with water, chopped straw, and animal dung. Their feet do the heavy work, stomping and churning the mixture into a thick, uniform consistency. The work is hard and messy, but there's a palpable sense of accomplishment in the air. This isn't just drudgery, it's creation. They are literally building their world from the ground up. Once the mixture is right, They pack the thick adobe into rectangular wooden molds, creating the mud bricks that form the building blocks of their civilization. The bricks are laid out in long, neat rows to bake and harden in the relentless Anatolian sun. Finally, they begin to lay the bricks, using more of the wet mud mixture as mortar, building the walls course by course. They will finish the walls with a smooth plaster of finer clay, perhaps even decorating it with simple painted designs. The home that rises from their labor is a testament to their strength and industry. It is a cool refuge from the summer heat, a warm sanctuary from the winter cold. This is the glamorous illusion, the powerful, communal act of women constructing their own environment, creating a safe, stable, and nurturing space for their families with their own bare hands. It is the ultimate act of nesting, a physical manifestation of community and domestic strength. You know what these walls are made of. Clay, straw, and dung. You've seen the cracks in the Queen's palace, and you understand the secret that every ancient homeowner knew intimately. The moment the house is finished, nature begins its relentless attempts to reclaim it. The shocking reality is that these hand-built walls, the very symbol of security and home, were also a thriving, multi-species ecosystem. They were, in essence, vertical bug hotels. That straw mixed into the bricks. It's a food source. Termites, nearly invisible, could be silently feasting on the organic matter within the walls, turning the sturdy bricks into a hollow, fragile shell over the course of years. The dung, used as a binding agent. It can carry the eggs of parasitic worms and other pathogens, which in a dry state are dormant, but can be activated with moisture. A leak in the roof, a splash from a water pot, could awaken something unpleasant within the very structure of the home. You run your hand along the interior wall. It feels solid. But listen closely, and you hear it. The faint, dry rustle of a scorpion skittering in the hollow space behind the plaster. The high-pitched scratching of a mouse that has chewed a tunnel from the outside, creating a superhighway through the center of the wall. At night, the house would come alive with these secret residents. Spiders would emerge from tiny crevices to spin their webs. Centipedes would hunt in the darkness. Snakes, drawn by the presence of rodents, might find their way into the wall cavities, creating a terrifying surprise for the family. Imagine the woman who built this wall, lying on her sleeping mat at night. She hears a noise. Is it the wind? The house settling? Or is it something moving inside the wall, just inches from her head? This was a constant, low-level anxiety. Every crack was a potential doorway for an unwanted guest. Every dark corner had to be approached with caution. The home was a fortress, but the enemy was already inside the gates, embedded in the very material of its construction. This wasn't seen as a failure of architecture, it was simply a fact of life. The natural world wasn't something to be kept out, it was something to be managed. The worldview of the time didn't draw a hard line between the human dwelling and the wider environment. Their home was part of the landscape, and the creatures of the landscape were, to a degree, their housemates. A snake in the wall was a nuisance, perhaps even an omen, but it wasn't an existential crisis that required an exterminator. It was a problem to be dealt with, just like a leaking roof or a smoky fire. The very act of building her home from the earth meant that she could never truly leave the wildness of the earth behind. It was her constant, and sometimes creepy, companion. And this constant negotiation between safety and danger, between hope and fear, was never more acute than during the most perilous time in a woman's life, childbirth. The sun is setting, casting long shadows across the dusty courtyard. We return to the interior of the home you've just seen being built, its mud brick walls now glowing with the warm, rosy light of the dying day. The air inside is still and heavy with anticipation. The young woman, barely more than a girl, lies on a clean straw mat. Her face is beaded with sweat, her knuckles white as she grips a leather strap during a contraction. She is in labor, surrounded by the elder women of her family, her mother, her aunts, the local midwife. The atmosphere is a mixture of quiet encouragement, sacred ritual, and palpable tension. The midwife, a woman with kind eyes and hands as gnarled as olive roots, murmurs ancient words of comfort and protection. She places a small object on the laboring woman's swollen belly. It is a clay amulet, shaped by the midwife's own hands. It's a crude, flat disc, hastily fired, with a rough sketch of a goddess etched into its surface, perhaps the same full-breasted figure of Fertility, you saw the priestess crafting with such care. On another amulet, hung around the young woman's neck, are 7 small dots, a magical number meant to ward off evil spirits. The midwife has also drawn a circle on the floor around the birthing mat with sacred, blessed clay, a magical barrier to prevent demons and malevolent forces from entering the space and harming the mother or child. You are witnessing a profound act of faith. In a world with no understanding of germs or modern obstetrics, these clay charms and rituals are their most powerful medicine. They are a shield, a prayer made tangible, a way of marshalling the forces of good against the overwhelming forces of chaos that childbirth represented. The mother-to-be clutches the amulet on her belly, its cool, earthy solidity a focal point in her sea of pain. It is a direct link to the protection of the divine, a promise of safety pressed into a humble piece of fired earth. This is the glamorous illusion, the sacred, woman-centered ritual of birth, where ancient wisdom and divine protection are channeled through these clay talismans to ensure a safe delivery. It is a moment of hope, faith, and communal female power. But as the hours wear on, the grim reality of the situation becomes impossible to ignore. The labor is not progressing. The baby is in the wrong position. The midwife's comforting words turn into urgent prayers. Her bag of tools contains no forceps, no suction cups, no access to surgical intervention. Her tools are her hands, her experience with past births, and a collection of herbs that are likely ineffective. The sacred clay circle on the floor cannot stop a postpartum hemorrhage. The amulet resting on the woman's belly cannot turn a breech baby. The shocking reality of childbirth in the ancient world was its lethality. It was, quite simply, one of the leading causes of death for women. For every 10 women who went into labor, 1 or 2 might not survive. And for every 10 babies born, 2 or 3 might die within their first year. These are staggering, terrifying statistics. The beautiful, hopeful ritual with the clay charms is set against a backdrop of almost unimaginable peril. The room, which felt so warm and safe just hours ago, now feels like a trap. The mud brick walls seem to close in, absorbing the woman's cries of pain and fear. The midwife does what she can. She may try to physically turn the baby from the outside, a painful and dangerous procedure. She may administer a potion, made of powdered gazelle dung, believing its magical properties will speed the delivery. She might shake the mother violently, a desperate and misguided attempt to dislodge the infant. Each intervention, born of desperation and a complete lack of medical knowledge, only increases the risk of infection, internal tearing, and death. There is no clean water for washing hands, only the water from that same porous clay jug we saw earlier. The straw on the floor, though fresh, is still a potential source of infection. Every element of the environment is a threat. The worldview that governed this moment was one of cosmic struggle. A difficult birth was not a medical emergency, it was a battle. The mother was fighting against a demon, perhaps the dreaded Lamashtu, a malevolent goddess who snatched or killed newborns. The clay amulets and rituals were their weapons in this supernatural war. Their failure was not a failure of medicine, but a sign that the demon was too strong or that the gods had been offended. This belief system, while providing a framework for understanding the tragedy, did nothing to prevent it. It explained away the horrifying mortality rates as a matter of spiritual fate rather than physical reality. The hope placed in that small clay charm was immense, because it was all they had. It represented the boundary of their power against the vast, terrifying wilderness of their own biology. Even if the mother and child survived this ordeal, their lives were governed by a strict set of rules that were also, as it happens, recorded on tablets of clay. Let's imagine that the young woman from our last scene has survived. Against the odds, both she and her child are healthy. She has passed through the crucible of childbirth and now re-enters the structured world of Hittite society. This society, you remember from Queen Pujupa's throne room, was highly organized and bureaucratic. And the foundation of this organization, the framework that governed every aspect of life from royal treaties to domestic disputes, was the law. You find yourself now not in a home, but in a scribal school or a state archive. The air smells of dust and dry clay. All around you are shelves, wooden racks stacked high with thousands of clay tablets. This is the legal code of the Hittites. The senior scribe is teaching a group of apprentices, his reed stylus flying across a fresh tablet as he reads aloud. He is reciting one of the laws concerning women. You listen, and you are surprised by what you hear. If a man seizes a woman in the mountains, it is the man's crime and he will be killed. But if he seizes her in her house, it is the woman's crime and the woman will be killed. Another law: if a woman's husband dies, her brother-in-law shall take her as his wife. If she has no brother-in-law, her father-in-law shall take her. And another, even more striking: a woman's property which she brings with her in marriage remains her own. If she divorces her husband, she takes it with her. You are looking at one of the most progressive legal codes of the ancient Near East. In a world where women were often considered little more than property, Hittite law granted them a surprising degree of protection and agency. The law recognized the concept of rape, distinguishing between a consensual act and an assault, placing the blame squarely on the man in certain circumstances. It provided a clear, stable structure for a woman's life after the death of her husband, ensuring she remained within the protective and economic sphere of a family. Most remarkably, it granted her the right to own and control her own property. This is the glamorous illusion, a society of enlightened justice, where women's rights are codified and protected, their value and autonomy preserved on immutable tablets of baked clay. It seems a world away from the brutal realities we have witnessed so far. But then the scribe moves on to another section of the law, the section dealing with punishments. The abstract, legal language gives way to a shocking, visceral reality. He reads a new passage: if a free man and a slave woman have a disagreement and he strikes her, causing her to miscarry, he shall pay a fine of 10 shekels of silver. A mere fine. But then, if a woman uses witchcraft to cause another woman to miscarry, they shall lead her to the river ordeal. If the river finds her guilty, she shall be put to death. The punishment for a woman harming another woman is infinitely more severe than for a man doing the same. And the punishments are intensely physical. The law speaks of being put to the axe or being stoned to death. For certain sexual transgressions, the law dictated that the offending couple be brought before the king, who could choose to have them executed or to pardon them. But the text adds a chilling detail: even if the king pardons them, the man must kneel, and the woman is made to stand on his neck. It is a public, physical act of ritual humiliation. The most disturbing punishments were often reserved for women who transgressed sexual or social norms. A woman found guilty of bestiality, for instance, would be killed, but the law carefully stipulated that the king must not be able to see her, implying a death so shameful she must be erased from sight. This is the shocking reality. The same clay tablets that offered such progressive protections also prescribed punishments of terrifying brutality. The law was a double-edged sword. It could be a shield, but it could also be a weapon, and it was often wielded with far more ferocity against women than men, especially when their crimes touched upon the sensitive areas of sexuality, reproduction, and perceived social order. The world-view that reconciled this was obsessed with purity and order. The property laws were practical. They prevented endless disputes and kept wealth consolidated within families. But a woman's body, especially her reproductive capacity, was not just her own. It was a vessel for the continuation of the family line, the clan, and the state itself. A crime that threatened this like witchcraft causing a miscarriage was an attack on the very fabric of society and had to be met with overwhelming force. The river ordeal, where the accused was thrown into a river and their innocence or guilt was determined by whether they sank or floated, was not seen as random. It was a direct appeal to the river god for judgment. It was divine justice. The brutal physical punishments were not just retribution, they were purification, a way of cleansing the community of a dangerous taint. The progressive laws showed a society that valued women as integral economic and social actors. The brutal punishments showed a society that was also terrified of female power when it operated outside of its designated channels. The clay tablets, in their silent, ordered rows, contained both a promise of protection and the threat of a horrific, violent death. The law provided order, but the essence of daily life, the very sustenance of the community, was cooked in ovens made of that same clay. Let's leave the dusty, silent archive of laws and step back into the vibrant, noisy heart of the community. You are drawn by a smell that is arguably the most comforting and universal in human history, the smell of baking bread. This scent leads you to a communal oven, a large, dome-shaped structure built in an open area between a cluster of homes. Like everything else, it's made of clay, a thick layer of adobe packed over a stone base, its surface blackened by years of use. This oven is the social and culinary center of the neighborhood. Women from several households have gathered here. The atmosphere is warm and convivial, a stark contrast to the solitary tensions we've witnessed before. They chat and laugh as they wait their turn, their arms covered in flour. One woman skillfully slaps a flattened disc of barley dough onto the hot interior wall of the oven, where it will stick and bake in minutes into a puffy, delicious flatbread. Another woman pulls a heavy ceramic pot out of the embers at the oven's base. She lifts the lid, and a cloud of savory steam billows out, carrying the rich aroma of a lamb and lentil stew, slow-cooked for hours to tender perfection. Children play nearby, hoping for a warm piece of bread straight from the fire. This is more than just cooking. It's a daily ritual of community. The shared oven saves fuel and labor, turning a daily chore into a social event. It's where news is exchanged, advice is given, and friendships are reinforced. The food that emerges from this clay dome is wholesome, life-sustaining, and delicious. You can almost taste the nutty flavor of the fresh-baked bread and the rich, hearty stew. This is the glamorous illusion, a picture of communal harmony, of simple, nourishing food prepared with shared effort and joy. It is the idealized image of the ancient village, a world of perfect, organic sustenance pulled from the earth and fire. But as a woman offers you a piece of bread, your modern knowledge kicks in, and you look at the food with a different kind of awareness. Let's consider the ingredients. The grain for this bread was stored in one of those large, porous clay jars we saw earlier. Remember the hidden mold and mycotoxins? They are baked right into this wholesome-looking loaf. They won't make you sick immediately, but they are a part of the meal. An invisible tax on the body's health. Now, think about the meat in that savory stew. You are living in a world without refrigeration. An animal was slaughtered this morning, and the meat was cooked immediately. That's the best-case scenario. But what if the meat is a day old? How was it stored overnight? Likely in a cool part of the house, perhaps in a clay pot covered with a cloth. In the Anatolian heat, bacteria would have begun to multiply within hours. The slow cooking process of the stew would kill most of it, but not all. And it would do nothing to eliminate the toxins some bacteria produce. A bit of an off taste in the meat would be masked by the herbs and spices, dismissed as unimportant. The shocking reality is that food spoilage and foodborne illness were a constant, unavoidable part of life. What they considered fresh we would deem dangerously past its prime. There was no concept of pathogens. Food was either obviously rotten slimy, green, or crawling with maggots, or it was considered edible. The vast grey area in between, where food could look and smell acceptable but be teeming with salmonella or E. coli, was a complete mystery. The endless cycle of summer sickness, diarrhea, and fevers that plagued every ancient community was not blamed on the leftover stew from the night before, but on a curse, a breath of bad air, or drinking from the wrong spring. And then there are the parasites. The lamb in that stew likely grazed on pasture land contaminated with the eggs of tapeworms or liver flukes. The slow cooking might not be hot enough to kill all the encysted larvae. Eating this delicious meal could mean acquiring a silent, energy-sapping passenger that would live in your intestines for years, contributing to malnutrition and anemia. The vegetables from the garden were fertilized with animal manure, and if not washed meticulously, a difficult task with limited, and likely contaminated, water could carry roundworm or other parasites. The world view here was one of resignation. A certain amount of sickness was the price of being alive. The connection between the food and the illness was simply not made with any scientific consistency. They understood that truly rotten food would make you sick, but the more subtle dangers were invisible, attributed instead to the whimsical cruelty of the gods or fate. The communal clay oven, that symbol of warmth and community, was also the site where these hidden dangers were cooked into the daily meals. It was a place of delicious sustenance and profound, unrecognized risk, and just as they added dangerous things to their food unknowingly, they deliberately added them to their faces, storing these toxic cosmetics in beautiful jars of clay. We move away from the communal oven and into the quiet intimacy of a woman's private quarters. This is a woman of some status, perhaps the wife of a wealthy merchant or a high-ranking official. The room is decorated with those vibrant textiles we saw being made, and the air is scented with a hint of myrrh. She is seated before a small, polished bronze mirror, which reflects a dim, slightly distorted image of her face. She is performing the ancient ritual of applying makeup, a practice as much about social standing and magical protection as it was about beauty. On a low wooden table beside her sits an array of small, elegant containers. They are made of the finest clay, thrown on a potter's wheel to achieve a delicate thinness, and then burnished to a smooth, almost glassy sheen. Some are simple shapes, Others are more fanciful, carved to look like ducks or fish. These are her cosmetic pots, the ancient equivalent of a makeup bag. With a slender ivory stick, she dips into one of the pots and retrieves a small amount of a fine, black powder. This is kohl. With intense concentration, she carefully lines her upper and lower eyelids, extending the line out towards her temples in the classic, almond-eyed look you've seen in Egyptian art. The effect is dramatic and alluring. It makes her eyes look larger, brighter, and mysterious. From another pot, she takes a tiny amount of a greenish powder and dusts it onto her eyelids. This is made from ground malachite. From a third pot, a bright, white powder is used to lighten her complexion, giving her a pale, aristocratic look. Her lips and cheeks are tinted red with a paste, made from crushed ochre mixed with animal fat. The entire process is transformative. She is not just enhancing her features, she is creating a mask of power, sophistication, and divine favor. The heavy kohl around her eyes was believed to have magical properties, warding off the evil eye and protecting her from eye infections caused by the sun's glare and ever-present dust. This is the glamorous illusion, the elegant, wealthy woman creating a face of timeless beauty and power, using precious minerals stored in exquisite clay jars. She is a living work of art, a symbol of her husband's success and her own high status. But now, you lean closer. You look at the ingredients with the curse of modern knowledge. The black kohl, so striking and dramatic, is made by grinding galena, which is the natural mineral form of lead sulfide. With every application, she is absorbing a small amount of lead into her system through the delicate mucous membranes of her eyes. The white powder she uses to lighten her skin. That's cerussite, a lead carbonate, one of the most toxic lead-based compounds. She is literally painting her face with poison. The beautiful green eyeshadow from malachite, a copper carbonate, is less toxic but still a heavy metal that can cause severe skin irritation and is harmful if ingested, which it inevitably would be in small amounts. This is the shocking, insidious reality. Their daily beauty routine was an act of slow, cumulative self-poisoning. The very materials that created her image of perfect, aristocratic health were systematically destroying it from within. Lead poisoning is a horrific, creeping affliction. In the early stages, it causes fatigue, insomnia, and joint pain, all common complaints in the ancient world, easily dismissed or blamed on other things. As the poison builds up in her body, it would lead to anemia, cognitive decline, kidney failure, and damage to the nervous system. It could also cause infertility and miscarriages, tragedies that, as we've seen, would be blamed on witchcraft or divine anger, never on the pretty white powder in the delicate clay pot. The historical logic behind this is tragically understandable. These were the most vibrant, effective, and lasting pigments they had. Lead-based makeup created a smooth, opaque, and highly desirable pale complexion that was a clear marker of status. It showed you were a woman of leisure who did not have to toil in the sun-drenched fields. The protective, magical qualities they ascribed to kohl were, in a way, partially true. The lead compounds did have some antiseptic properties and could help prevent minor bacterial eye infections, a common scourge. They saw this immediate, positive effect and were completely blind to the devastating long-term consequences. There was no concept of toxicology, no way to connect the subtle, creeping symptoms of lead poisoning to the daily ritual of beauty. The beautiful clay pot, a symbol of her refinement, held a secret killer. The pursuit of an idealized, glamorous image was a silent death sentence, a perfect illustration of how the quest for a superficial ideal of health could be the very thing that destroyed the real thing. And for a woman whose status and survival depended entirely on her husband, the loss of her health or beauty could be catastrophic, especially if she were to find herself a widow. The scent of lead and myrrh fades, and the elegant cosmetic pots are put away. Let us now imagine a profound shift in the life of the woman we have been observing. Her husband, the source of her status and wealth, has died. One day, she is the respected wife of a powerful man. The next, she is a widow, a figure whose position in society is suddenly fraught with uncertainty and peril. You see her now, not in a moment of public display, but in a quiet, somber moment inside her home. The vibrant energy is gone, replaced by a heavy stillness. She is dressed in simple, undyed wool, her face free of the toxic makeup she once wore. Her future is a terrifying blank. But then, a visitor arrives. It is her late husband's brother, accompanied by a local elder acting as a witness. They unroll a sheepskin scroll, perhaps consult a clay tablet fetched from the city archives, much like the ones we saw earlier. It is her husband's will, a legal document that outlines her fate. The elder reads the text aloud, and the words offer a surprising degree of security. The Hittite laws, as we saw, were quite specific. The will likely stipulates that she is to be married to her husband's brother, a practice known as a levirate marriage. This isn't a romantic proposition, it's a social and economic mechanism. By marrying her, the brother keeps her and her degree, which, you recall, remains her own property within the family. The children she has with him will be considered heirs of her first husband, ensuring his line continues. The clay tablet law, in this instance, acts as a safety net. It provides a clear, legally binding path for her. She will not be cast out. She will not be left destitute. She will remain the mistress of her household, her social position will be maintained, and the economic unit of the family will remain intact. This is the glamorous illusion, a just and orderly society that cares for its vulnerable members, where the law, recorded on eternal clay, provides a shield for the widow, ensuring her continued protection, status and stability. It is a system designed to prevent the chaos and destitution that would otherwise be her fate. But the reality of her situation is far more complex and emotionally brutal than the clean lines of the law suggest. The law provides the what, but it cannot dictate the how. The shocking reality is the profound emotional and social vulnerability that lay beneath the legal protection. The new husband, her brother-in-law, may resent her. He may have a wife of his own who now sees her as a rival for resources and affection within the household. She may be viewed not as a respected member of the family, but as a burden, a duty he was forced to fulfill. The law says he must marry her, but it cannot force him to be kind. Imagine the daily humiliations. Her opinions, once valued, are now ignored. The servants, who once obeyed her without question, now look to the other wife for instructions. She might be given the smallest room, the last portion of food at meals. The children from her first marriage might be treated as secondary to the children of her new union. The law gave her a roof over her head, but it could not give her a voice at her own hearth. She is a ghost in her own home, her presence a constant, awkward reminder of a dead man and a legal obligation. And what if her husband had no brother? The law might then pass her to her father-in-law. Imagine the discomfort and potential for exploitation in such a relationship. If there were no male relatives left in her husband's family, the law might stipulate that she can marry an outsider, but only one from a specific class or profession, a man of her gait, further restricting her options. Her life becomes a chess piece, moved about on the board of family politics and economics, her personal feelings almost entirely irrelevant. The legal framework was not designed for her happiness. It was designed for social and economic stability. Her well-being was secondary to the preservation of the family line and its property. This was the grim logic of their world. An unattached woman was a dangerous anomaly. She was a loose thread in the tightly woven fabric of society. She had no man to speak for her in legal disputes, no man to provide for her economically. The levirate marriage system, which seems so strange and restrictive to us, was their solution to this problem. It was a practical, if often emotionally cruel, way to ensure that every woman remained tethered to a patriarchal family structure. The clay tablet promised her survival, but it could never promise her peace or happiness. Her value was tied directly to her connection to a man and a family. Her position was always precarious, a single death away from a complete upheaval of her world. And this fundamental precarity was rooted in the most basic struggle of all, the struggle to wrest a living from the hard, unforgiving soil. We leave the stifling social confines of the widow's home and walk out of the town, into the open countryside that surrounds it. The landscape is vast and sun-scorched, a panorama of rolling hills and distant, hazy mountains. The air is drier here, carrying the scent of wild thyme, dust, and the deep, rich smell of the earth itself. You are standing at the edge of a field, and before you, a woman is working. She is not creating a single, precious object like a pot or a bolt of cloth. Her canvas is the land itself. She is bent over, a heavy, primitive hoe in her hands, its handle worn smooth by years of use, its blade a simple piece of fire-hardened wood or perhaps a small, precious bronze head. She is breaking up the clods of earth in a field that has just been ploughed by a pair of oxen. The soil here is not the soft, dark loam of a river valley. It is Anatolian soil, heavy, dense, and full of clay. When it's dry, it's as hard as brick. When it's wet, it's a thick, sticky mire that clings to her feet and her tools. Her work is a relentless, back-breaking struggle against the nature of the ground itself. Behind her, another woman follows, a leather bag slung over her shoulder. With a rhythmic swing of her arm, she casts handfuls of seed barley or emmer wheat into the freshly turned furrows. There is a powerful, almost spiritual connection in this scene. These women are partners with the earth. They are initiating the ancient cycle of sowing and reaping that sustains all of human life. Their bare feet are planted firmly on the soil, their bodies moving in a rhythm that has been passed down for 1,000 generations. They know this land intimately its moods, its needs, its potential. This is the glamorous illusion, the noble, timeless image of the female farmer, the giver of life, working in harmony with nature to bring forth the bounty of the earth. She is a figure of strength, resilience, and fundamental importance, the bedrock of civilization. But look closer at her body. Look at the strain in her shoulders as she swings the heavy hoe. Look at the way her back is permanently stooped from a lifetime of this labor. The hands are not just calloused, they are scarred and misshapen. Her joints ache with what we would now call arthritis, a condition she would simply call old age, even if she is only 35. The shocking reality is that this harmonious work was a brutal, all-consuming form of physical degradation. The heavy clay soil, the very foundation of their existence, was a relentless opponent that broke their bodies over time. And what was the reward for this back-breaking labor? The harvest was never guaranteed. A season of poor rains could leave the crops withered in the field. A swarm of locusts could descend and devour an entire year's worth of work in a single afternoon. Even in a good year, the yields from this tough, non-irrigated land were low. The grain they harvested was often barely enough to feed their own family and pay the portion owed as taxes to the temple or the palace. The result was a life lived perpetually on the edge of subsistence. This leads to the most shocking reality of all: chronic malnutrition. The bread they baked in those clay ovens might have filled their bellies, but it often lacked essential nutrients. Their diet was monotonous, based overwhelmingly on barley porridge and bread, supplemented with whatever lentils or meager vegetables they could grow. Meat was a rare luxury. This lack of dietary diversity led to widespread deficiencies. Iron deficiency caused anemia, leaving them perpetually weak and fatigued. Lack of calcium and vitamin D led to poor bone health. You can see it in the woman's frame. She is small, her growth likely stunted by the poor nutrition of her own childhood. Her teeth, worn down by the grit in the stone-ground flour, are plagued by decay and abscesses, a source of constant, debilitating pain. She is old before her time, her body worn out by the twin forces of relentless labor and inadequate food. The logic of their existence was simple and stark: you work or you starve. There was no alternative. The connection to the land was not a romantic choice. It was a sentence of hard labor. The physical pain, the exhaustion, the gnawing hunger of the lean months before the harvest, this was the accepted, normal state of being for the vast majority of the population. They saw the earth not as a nurturing mother, but as a harsh and demanding master that had to be placated and battled with every single year. Her life was defined by this struggle, a cycle of toil written not on a clay tablet, but on her own aching bones. The very earth she worked, the source of all life, was also the source of her profound, lifelong suffering. And this same earth provided the clay for the water jugs that brought another daily and dirty reality into her life. Let's turn our attention from the dry, dusty fields to the one resource more precious than grain, water. You follow the woman from the fields as she returns to the village at dusk, her body aching from the day's labor. The first stop is the communal well, the social hub and the lifeline of the entire community. Here, women gather, exchanging the day's news while they wait, their turn to lower a leather bucket into the cool darkness and haul up the precious, life-giving water. The well itself is a marvel of communal effort, lined with stones to prevent its collapse. The woman you are watching finally fills her water jug. It is a large, handsome ceramic vessel, a product of the local pottery tradition we've already observed, perhaps one she made herself. She hefts it onto her shoulder, a practiced and graceful motion despite its weight, and begins the walk home. Back in her small, mud-brick house, she pours some of the water into a basin. She dips a linen cloth into the cool water, and washes the grime of the fields from her face and hands. The feeling is one of immense relief and cleanliness. In a world of dust and sweat, this act of washing feels like a sacred ritual, a moment of personal purification that separates the hard labor of the day from the relative peace of the evening. She then pours some of the water from the clay ewer into a cup for her child to drink. This water, drawn from the earth and carried in an earthen vessel, represents purity, health, and refreshment. This is the glamorous illusion, the simple, wholesome ritual of water, the pristine element that cleanses, quenches, and sustains life. The image of the woman at the well, providing clean water for her family, is a timeless symbol of care and domestic order. But now, your modern understanding of sanitation forces you to see the scene for what it truly is. Let's look at the bigger picture. Where does this well water come from? It's groundwater, seeping through the soil and collecting in this shaft. But where does the village waste go? There is no sewage system. There are no pipes, no drains, no septic tanks. Human and animal waste is simply thrown into designated refuse pits at the edge of the settlement, or often, just into a nearby alley or gully. The rain, when it comes, washes the filth from these pits and streets, and where does it go? It soaks into these very same ground that the well draws its water from. The shocking reality is that the well, the village's single source of fresh water, was almost certainly contaminated. It was a breeding ground for bacteria like E. coli, cholera, and typhoid. The water that looked so clear and pure in the clay jug was, in fact, a cocktail of invisible pathogens. The constant, low-level gastrointestinal diseases, the fevers, and the devastating dysentery outbreaks that could wipe out a significant portion of the population were not seen as a water quality issue. They were, as always, blamed on angry gods, bad spirits, or seasonal imbalances. Now, consider the act of washing. The woman washes her face in the basin. The water is now grey with dirt. What does she do with it? She walks to the door of her house and unceremoniously dumps it in the street. Every other household does the same. The unpaved streets of the town are a mire of discarded water, animal droppings, and household trash. In the dry season, it turns to bacteria-laden dust that the wind whips up and blows everywhere, into homes, onto food being prepared, and into people's lungs. In the wet season, it becomes a thick, foul-smelling mud that everyone must trudge through. The clean, pure feeling of washing her face is a fleeting illusion, immediately negated by the profoundly unsanitary environment she lives in. The worldview that allowed this was one where filth was a visible problem, not a microscopic one. If the water wasn't chunky or obviously discolored, it was considered clean. If the street wasn't piled so high with refuse that you couldn't walk, it was considered acceptable. The connection between the unseen germs in the well water and the child's deadly fever a week later was a scientific leap they were simply incapable of making. They had no other choice. This was the only water source, and this was the only way they knew to dispose of waste. Their concept of hygiene was ritual and aesthetic, not biological. The clay ewer, a symbol of life-sustaining water, was in reality a vessel carrying the source of the community's most persistent and deadly diseases. The ritual of washing was less about achieving true cleanliness and more about creating a temporary, personal feeling of order in a world of inescapable grime. This disconnect between appearance and reality was never more pronounced than in the high-stakes world of royal diplomacy, where a foreign bride's value, recorded on clay, clashed with her terrifyingly vulnerable reality. Let's travel from the common well back to the rarefied air of the royal court. We return to the world of Queen Pujuhipa, a world of international politics and dynastic alliances. You are in a scribe's chamber, similar to the one where we saw the queen affix her seal to a letter for Ramesses II. This time, the scribe is meticulously drafting a different kind of document on a large, carefully prepared clay tablet. This is a marriage treaty. It is a list, an inventory of the immense degree of a foreign princess, perhaps from Babylon or Egypt, who is being sent to marry a Hittite king or prince. The scribe's stylus flies across the clay, listing the items in neat columns. 1 golden chariot inlaid with lapis lazuli, 20 gowns of the finest purple linen, 10 chests of cedar wood filled with perfumed oils, 500 head of cattle, a retinue of 50 servant girls, the list goes on, a breathtaking display of wealth and prestige. Each item represents not just its material value, but the power and status of the bride's home kingdom. This clay tablet is a contract, a piece of high-stakes diplomacy. The marriage it seals is not about love, it is about forging an alliance, securing a border, or ending a generation of conflict. The princess herself is the living, breathing embodiment of this treaty. You see her arrive weeks later, her caravan a dusty but impressive trail of wagons and people. She's unveiled in the court, a beautiful, exotic jewel, adorned in the magnificent gowns and jewelry listed on the tablet. She is the center of attention, a symbol of peace and prosperity, her value carefully calculated and recorded. This is the glamorous illusion, the fairy tale princess, whose worth is so great it must be itemized on an imperial document, who arrives in a foreign land as an honored guest and a symbol of a powerful new alliance. Her life appears to be one of unimaginable luxury and importance. But pull back the curtain of ceremony. Once the welcoming feasts are over and the treaty is filed away in the clay archives, what is her life actually like? The shocking reality is one of profound and terrifying isolation. She is a stranger in a strange land, surrounded by a court that views her with suspicion and jealousy. She does not speak the language. She does not know the customs. The gods she grew up praying to are not the gods worshipped here. Her retinue of servants, her only link to home, may be slowly taken from her and replaced with Hittite servants who are, in reality, spies for the king and queen. Her every move is watched. Her every word is reported. The food is unfamiliar, the climate is different, and the political intrigue is a deadly maze she must navigate with no true allies. The beautiful gowns and golden chariot from her dowry are now just props in a gilded cage. The clay tablet that listed her immense value is a cold comfort in the face of her powerlessness. Her primary, and in fact, her only, purpose in this new land is to produce a male heir. Her entire existence is reduced to her reproductive capacity. The pressure is immense and relentless. If she fails to conceive quickly, whispers will start. Is she barren? Has she angered the local gods? Is she deliberately thwarting the alliance? Her position becomes more precarious with each passing month. She is not a beloved wife, she is a political instrument, and if she fails to perform her function, she can be set aside, ignored, or worse. The king might take a second, Hittite wife, and the foreign princess would be relegated to a life of humiliating obscurity within the palace walls. Remember the queen, Pudippa. She was a Hittite priestess who married the king and eclipsed his first, Babylonian wife. The foreign bride knows this history. She knows her value is conditional. The logic of this world was brutally pragmatic. The state's stability was paramount. Alliances were fragile, and a royal marriage was a way to cement them. The personal happiness of the bride was a trivial concern when weighed against the security of the empire. She was a political asset, and her emotional well-being was a luxury the state could not afford to prioritize. The degree list, so impressive on its clay tablet, was not just a measure of her worth, it was a price. It was what her family was paid to send her away, forever. She was a willing sacrifice on the altar of diplomacy, her glamorous arrival masking a future of intense loneliness and fear. Her entire, vibrant life, with all its hidden anxieties, is now, like so many others, just an echo. The grand Hittite court dissolves into the mists of time. The foreign princess, the powerful queen, the merchant, the priestess, the potter, the farmer, they all recede. You find yourself in a quiet, still, and brightly lit room, far removed from the dust and grime of the ancient world. It is the sterile back room of a modern museum. The air is climate-controlled, humming with the gentle drone of dehumidifiers. The smell is of acid-free paper and old dust. Here, history is not lived, it is curated. Before you, on a padded tray, lies a single object. It is not a golden chariot or a silver seal. It is a potsherd, a broken piece of a clay jar, no bigger than the palm of your hand. It is a reddish-brown color, its edges jagged and worn by 3,000 years spent buried in the earth. An archaeologist, wearing white cotton gloves, is examining it under a magnifying lamp. With gentle precision, she measures it, photographs it and enters its details into a database. Provenance, Hattusa, Lower Town. Period, Late Bronze Age. Material, earthenware, medium grit temper. It is given a number. It's 742. It is now a data point, a piece of evidence. This is the glamorous illusion of history and archaeology. It is a clean, scientific process of discovery and preservation. We find these fragments of the past, and we piece them together to create a neat, logical story of how people lived. We analyze the clay to understand trade patterns. We study the shape to understand its function. This broken sherd becomes a clue in a grand detective story, helping us reconstruct the past with order and intellectual satisfaction. It is a triumph of human knowledge over the chaos of time, a way of making the dead speak in a language we can understand, the language of data. But now, pick up that sherd. Ignore the sterile gloves and the database entry. Feel its rough texture, its surprising weight. This is not just at 742. This is not just a data point. This is a survivor. And its silence is deafening. The shocking reality is that this small, mute fragment of baked earth is all that is left of the vibrant, noisy, smelly, terrifying, and joyful world we have just spent all this time exploring. And this sherd was there for all of it. This very piece could be from the water jug that the woman with the aching back filled at the contaminated well. It carried the water that gave her family life, and also the pathogens that brought them fevers. Remember the sound of that water splashing into the basin. This sherd heard it. This could be a fragment from the large storage jar that held the family's grain, the one made by the woman with calloused, plague-caked hands. Perhaps that faint impression on the curve is the last trace of her fingerprint, a ghost of her touch preserved for millennia. It stood silent in the corner of the room as mold grew, invisibly in the grain, and it absorbed the sounds of the family's nightly meals. Maybe it was part of a bowl that held the savory lamb stew from the communal oven, a stew that was both nourishing and filled with unseen parasites. It felt the heat of the food, the scrape of a wooden spoon. Perhaps it was a piece of a dye pot, its porous surface still containing microscopic traces of urine and madder root, the lingering chemical signature of the brilliant red textiles that were a woman's pride and pain. It witnessed her stained, chapped hands and smelled the foul, ammoniac stench of her work. This sherd was in the room. It was on a shelf in that house built of mud brick, a silent witness to the scorpion in the wall and the mouse in the crawl space. It was there during the terrifying night of the young woman's labor, absorbing her cries of pain and the midwife's desperate prayers, sitting uselessly by as the clay amulets failed to work their magic. It might have held the toxic, lead makeup for the aristocratic woman, a silent accomplice to her slow poisoning. It might have been dropped and broken by the lonely, frightened foreign princess, a moment of frustration in her gilded cage. All of those lives, all of that sensory reality, the stench of the dye pots, the taste of the gritty bread, the pain of a toothache, the fear of childbirth, the joy of a shared laugh at the communal oven, all of it is gone. Utterly and completely gone. The women who lived these lives are anonymous, their names forgotten, their stories vanished. All that remains is this, a broken piece of clay. The worldview of history and archaeology, for all its scientific power, can only ever give us the faintest, most sterile echo of the past. It hands us a potsherd and tells us about firing temperatures and trade routes, when what we desperately want to know is the name of the woman who made it and whether her child survived the winter. The ultimate shocking reality is not the grime or the poison. It is the silence. It is the profound, overwhelming loss. This humble piece of clay is not a clue to a story. It is a tombstone for a million stories we will never know. And so, we are left with this echo, this fragment of a life made from the earth. The clay that built their homes, held their food, recorded their laws, and channeled their prayers is the same clay that now offers us the only tangible connection back to them. It is an imperfect connection, a whisper instead of a voice. But it is what we have. The weight of that small sherd in your hand begins to feel heavier now, not with its physical mass, but with the mass of all the lost moments it represents. Let that feeling settle. Let the quiet of the museum room become the quiet of your own room. The journey is over. The vibrant, chaotic, and often brutal world of ancient Anatolia fades away, leaving behind only these faint, lingering impressions, like fingerprints left in soft clay. You have walked through their homes, felt the heat of their ovens, and understood the fears that lurked beneath the surface of their lives. You've seen how the very substance of their world humble clay was a source of power and art, but also of sickness and hidden danger. There is nothing more to see now, nothing more to learn tonight. The work is done. The fields have been sown, the pots have been fired, the laws have been written. The women of the past can finally rest. And so can you. Allow the details to soften, to blur at the edges. The sharp facts can melt away into the gentle flow of your own thoughts as you drift closer to sleep. Let the rhythmic beat of the weaver's comb become the rhythm of your own slow, steady breathing. Let the deep, earthy smell of a mud brick wall become the comforting scent of your own pillow. There are no more shocking realities to confront, no more illusions to shatter. There is only this moment, this quiet, this gentle descent into rest. The story is told. The clay has returned to the earth. And all is still. End of script. Sweet dreams.